In this video, I'm going to tell you something that helped me when I started watching Bitcoin videos on YouTube 10 years ago. Okay, I've been in Bitcoin since 2015. I've been working for Bitcoin startups since 2019, and I've talked to thousands of people about their rabbit hole journey from start to finish on getting into Bitcoin. And so it's this: focus on the Bitcoin units, focus on the amount of Bitcoin you hold, not just on its US dollar exchange rate. Owning 0.21 Bitcoin is a big deal. That is a big deal. Even as I'm recording right now, Bitcoin's going and touching $50,000 again per Bitcoin. Regardless of what the USD exchange rate is when you watch this video, owning 0.21 Bitcoin is a big deal because there's only 21 million. There's only 21 million. And really coming to grasp that supply constraint and that hard cap takes time. It takes time. And then you get into the halving and how every 4 years, the amount released per day gets cut in half. And then you get into the difficulty adjustment and how the mining process really is fair and kind of reaches this equilibrium with how many miners are online. Each of these things that you kind of pick up as you continue watching Bitcoin videos and continue reading Bitcoin books and kind of learning about the software really adds up. That all adds up and stacks together. And you can, at the high level, again, with your own personal finances in mind. So as you're going down that journey and learning more about the software, with your own personal finances in mind, and kind of thinking about the economics in mind, focus on the Bitcoin unit. Like when you're saving dollars, when you're stacking dollars, and when dollars is your main currency, there's not a difference between kind of dollar units and dollar value. I mean, there kind of is, but inflation is really hard to measure, which is exactly the problem and why Bitcoin is interesting. Because Bitcoin there's a finite amount, there's a fixed supply, inflation and deflation works way different in Bitcoin because there's a fixed supply. Fiat currencies, because there's an infinite supply and because the supply of them and the lending rates of them are decided by small groups of people, that is why the economy is the way it is. Bitcoin is fully different. Because there's a finite supply, you are able to look at your supply that you own differently than when you look at dollars. That's the main thing you want to wrap your head around in the early days, is looking at the Bitcoin units that you own differently than you think about other types of investing. Like when you're doing stock investing, there's the units of the stock, right? That translates to a USD dollar value of your investment. Totally. So that in that sense, you can get used to stacking these other units. But in the case of stocks, a company can always buy their shares back, so there's less out in the public, or they can sell new shares. They can create and sell new shares. And so in that sense, there's always kind of the amount of them is still determined by a small group of people based on market dynamics. Or gold. Like if the USD exchange rate of gold increases, then more people will be incentivized to begin going and exploring and mining more gold or searching for it in other places, right? Bitcoin, if more miners go online because the USD exchange rate goes up, more people will be incentivized to be more efficient with their energy and mine Bitcoin. Totally. But then the same amount of Bitcoin released per day gets spread out amongst those miners. They are not kind of creating new supply. That's what makes it fully different. And that's why that's an early thing that you have to wrap your head around and come to grips with. And so then your stack, is a percent of a finite supply. And 0.21 is a big deal. The most amount of people that could ever own 0.21 Bitcoin is 100 million total. And then from there, you can start backing out the math of Satoshi's coins are unaccessible. There's lost coins from people being in early days and learning how the software works. There's corporations that are already stacking Bitcoin on their balance sheet. There's wealthy individuals that are already stacking way more than 0.21 Bitcoin. And so you, as a solo individual, owning 0.21 is significant. Like, you have a significant seat at the table as Bitcoin software continues to grow and grow and increase its percentage of usage across all of kind of the money buckets of the entire world. And you contrast that with how many dollars are required to own 0.21 Bitcoin. Those amount of dollars are a good amount. Like, it's a good amount. It's a great kind of emergency fund. It's a great kind of bucket of money, but it's not significant. And this is tough. Like, this is tough to hear. And this is the problem with fiat money. It's not significant in terms of how old we will all live, or kind of in terms of purchasing power of like real things that we need for our house and for our lives over the course of our lives. Whereas 0.21 Bitcoin, as Bitcoin software continues to grow, is very significant. And so that's a mindset shift that's super helpful in the early days of stacking. This is why dollar cost averaging is so popular and a common strategy for so many people that get into Bitcoin, because you're building up your relationship between the US dollar units and the Bitcoin units over time. And so when you trade a set amount of USD dollar units for the Bitcoin units on a schedule, you're building up the association with the Bitcoin units over time. And so I talk about how that's a great strategy for early days. And then as you continue to do it, what's going to eventually happen is you're eventually being able to look at every bucket of money that you have. So your checking account, your savings account, your retirement bucket, all of the different buckets where USD dollars exist in your life, and Bitcoin products are there helping people make the transition from USD into Bitcoin across those buckets. I think where Bitcoin kind of advice and education, or just thoughtpreneurship, whatever, like there's a middle part of kind of the general advice out there that is missing. Like, there's really good like DCA and like get started advice. And then there's very sophisticated like percent of allocation, whatever. Like this middle part of like, you've been dollar cost averaging for a long time. I think there's this loop of where Bitcoin is a savings technology and Bitcoin is a savings technology only. There's a loop where people get stuck right there, where it's like, oh, like Bitcoin is just for savings. Bitcoin is just for savings. And I think that's what throws it kind of back into like just the stock investing bucket. And so how I'm trying to break out, and I felt my own self do this. Like, this is, again, through like 10 years of doing this and through talking to thousands of Bitcoiners, like I've watched people get stuck in the, like they're progressing, and then they get stuck in this, like the common advice is like, Bitcoin is for savings, USD is for spending. Like, and I actually don't agree with that. Like, I don't agree with that. I don't think what's happening. I think what's happening is we have all of these different buckets of money in our life based on our own personal finances and how we like to do it. Bitcoin is competing against fiat, which for most of us is USD. Bitcoin is competing against USD in every single one of these types of money buckets for our personal finances. But there's mostly only advice about Bitcoin savings, okay? And so that's why you have to start with the foundational knowledge of owning 0.21 Bitcoin is a big deal. And then as you get past that and you realize that you have a very significant seat at the table as Bitcoin software continues to grow and dominate the world, then you can level yourself up on how is your personal finance stack having Bitcoin move deeper and deeper into it. How are you switching off the legacy currency and switching on to the base currency of the new reality of the future of where technology is going?